The slap echoed across the diner like a dropped plate. Coffee spilled. Silverware froze mid-air. And in the center of it all, an elderly black woman, Evelyn Brooks, stood still, her hand resting gently on her cheek. Not crying, not shouting, just breathing. The man who hit her straightened his expensive suit like nothing happened. "You don't belong here," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. No one stepped in. Not the couple at the counter. Not the manager. Not even the people recording on their phones. Evelyn didn't argue. She didn't beg. She simply looked at him. Calm. Steady. Like she knew something the rest of the room didn't. And as she reached down to pick up her fallen purse, a small card slipped halfway out. An old, worn card with a diner logo every person in that city had seen before. No one noticed it. No one except one man in the corner, who quietly picked up her ring from the floor and walked outside. Because what that man had just witnessed wasn't the end of a moment. It was the beginning of a mistake that would cost far more than a spilled drink or a public slap. The lunch rush at Roseland Diner came in waves, the kind that rattled plates and filled the air with the steady rhythm of forks tapping ceramic, offshusk, and low conversations blending into a familiar hum. Outside, buses hissed to a stop along 95th Street, doors folding open with a tired sigh. Inside, the lighting was warm but dim, the kind that softened faces and made the chrome edges of the counter glow like something from another decade. Evelyn Brooks sat in her usual booth by the window. She always chose that seat, the one where the sunlight filtered through the slightly fogged glass and warmed her hands as she wrapped them around a chipped white mug. Her coat was folded neatly beside her, a worn wool piece she had mended herself more times than she could count. The waitress, Lily, had already brought her tea without asking. 2 sugars, no lemon. It was the kind of quiet understanding that only came from years of small, repeated kindness. Evelyn stirred her tea slowly, listening more than watching. A construction crew laughed too loudly at the counter. A young mother tried to keep her toddler from climbing out of a high chair. Somewhere behind the kitchen doors, a cook shouted an order over the hiss of the grill. It was an ordinary day. Until the door opened again. The cold air that rushed in didn't belong to the rhythm of the place. It cut through it. Conversations dipped, not stopped, just enough to notice. A man stepped inside wearing a tailored charcoal suit that looked like it had never seen a wrinkle. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the dull linoleum floor like it was beneath him. Daniel Reed didn't belong in Roseland Diner. He paused just long enough to take in the room, his eyes moving quickly, measuring, dismissing. Then he walked forward, each step precise, controlled, like he expected the space to rearrange itself around him. Lily approached with a hesitant smile. "Table for one, sir?" He didn't look at her right away. "Somewhere clean," he said, brushing an invisible speck from his sleeve. "And fast. I don't have all day." Lily nodded, leading him toward the empty booth behind Evelyn's. Her hands trembled just slightly as she set down a menu. Daniel didn't thank her. He was already pulling out his phone, already elsewhere. Evelyn glanced over her shoulder once, just enough to notice him, then returned her gaze to her tea. She had seen men like him before, men who carried their importance like a shield, or maybe a weapon. She reached for the sugar dispenser. It was a small movement, careful, measured. But in a space as tight as Roseland, small movements sometimes carried farther than intended. Her elbow brushed the edge of Daniel's table. The contact was barely there, a whisper of fabric against polished wood. But it was enough. The tall glass of iced tea, sitting near his hand, tipped. It fell slowly at first. Then, all at once, spilling across the table in a dark amber rush, it soaked into a leather portfolio, crept under a stack of documents, dripped onto the floor in steady, accusing taps. For a second, no one moved. Then Daniel stood up so quickly, his chair scraped harshly against the floor. "What the hell is wrong with you?" His voice cut through the diner, sharp and immediate. Every fork paused mid-air. Conversations collapsed into silence. Evelyn turned in her seat, already reaching for napkins. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice calm, steady. "Let me help clean that up." But Daniel wasn't looking at the napkins. He was looking at her. Really looking now. Taking in her coat, her age, the quiet way she carried herself. And something in his expression shifted. Not to understanding, but to something colder. "You think an apology fixes this?" he snapped, lifting the soaked portfolio. "Do you have any idea what you just ruined?" "I'll pay for whatever needs replacing," Evelyn replied gently. "It was an accident." "Of course it was," he said, laughing once without humor. "People like you always say that." "Accident. Sorry. Like that makes you belong in places you clearly don't." A ripple moved through the room. Not loud, not spoken, just felt. Lily took a step forward. "Sir, if we could just—" "Stay out of it." Daniel cut her off without turning. "This doesn't concern you." Evelyn remained standing now, napkins still in her hand. Her posture was straight, composed, like she had learned long ago that how you stood mattered more than what you said. "I didn't mean any harm," she said, "and I've offered to make it right." Daniel stepped closer. Too close. "You don't get to decide what right is," he said quietly, his voice dropping in a way that somehow felt louder. "You people never do." The words hung there, heavy and unmistakable. A man at the counter shifted uncomfortably. A couple in the corner looked down at their plates. No one spoke. Evelyn met his eyes. There was no anger in hers. No fear. Just something steady, something that didn't bend. "Sir," she said softly, "you should stop now." For a fraction of a second, something flickered across Daniel's face. Uncertainty, maybe, or the faintest irritation at being addressed like that. Then it vanished. "You don't tell me what to do," he said. And before anyone could move, before the moment could change direction, his hand came up. The sound echoed through the diner, not loud, not exaggerated, but sharp enough that it seemed to split the air in two. Evelyn's head turned with the force of it. The napkins slipped from her hand, drifting down like they had lost their purpose. Her teacup rattled against the saucer, a thin crack forming along its rim. No one breathed. No one moved. The only sound was the distant hiss of the bus outside, doors opening, closing, life continuing just beyond the glass. Evelyn didn't fall. She reached for the edge of the table, steadying herself. Slowly, she brought her hand to her cheek. Her fingers rested there for a moment, as if confirming something, not the pain, but the reality of what had just happened. Then she lowered her hand and looked at him. Not with fear, not with anger, but with something far heavier. Around them, phones began to rise, one by one, screens glowing faintly in the dim light. Recording. Witnessing. But still, no one stepped forward. In the corner booth, a man who had been sitting alone set his newspaper aside. His eyes moved from Daniel to Evelyn, sharp, focused. When something small rolled across the floor near his shoe, he bent down and picked it up. A gold ring. He turned it in his fingers once, then slipped it carefully into his pocket. Evelyn's voice, when she spoke again, was quiet enough that those closest had to lean in to hear. "You just made a mistake," she said, her tone even, almost gentle. Daniel scoffed, adjusting his cuff as if nothing had happened. The only mistake here was letting you sit in this place like you belonged. Evelyn held his gaze, and for the first time there was a weight behind her words that didn't match the room, didn't match the way anyone else saw her. A mistake, she repeated softly. You can't undo. The silence deepened, and somewhere, just beyond what anyone in that diner could see, something had already begun to move. Inside Roseland Diner, time seemed to hesitate, as if the moment itself wasn't sure how to continue. Evelyn Brooks stood still, her hand slowly lowered from her cheek, the faint redness already beginning to bloom against her dark skin. She didn't rush to speak again. She didn't step back. She didn't look around for help. She simply stood where she was, as if the ground beneath her belonged to her just as much as it belonged to anyone else in that room. Daniel Reed exhaled sharply, adjusting his jacket with a flick of annoyance, like brushing dust off something that had inconvenienced him. That's what happens, he muttered loud enough for the nearby tables to hear, when people forget their place. No one answered. At the counter, one of the construction workers looked down at his plate, pushing his eggs around with a fork he no longer intended to use. The young mother pulled her toddler closer, pressing the child's head gently into her shoulder so he wouldn't see. A man in a suit 2 booths over checked his phone, though the screen remained dark. Lily stood frozen beside the register. Her fingers trembled so badly she had to press them against the counter to steady herself. She looked from Evelyn to Daniel, then toward the kitchen where the manager hovered just behind the swinging doors. He gave her a small, tight shake of his head. Not now. Not him. Lily swallowed hard. Evelyn took a breath. It was quiet, controlled, almost invisible, but those closest to her noticed it. Not because it was dramatic, but because of what it wasn't. There was no panic in it, no shaking, just a steady, deliberate inhale, like someone who had learned long ago how to hold herself together when the world tried to pull her apart. I've already apologized, she said, her voice calm, even, and I meant it. Daniel let out a short laugh. Apologies don't fix everything, he replied, especially not when they come from someone who shouldn't have been sitting here in the first place. Evelyn didn't flinch. I've been coming here a long time, she said gently. That doesn't mean you belong, Daniel shot back. The words hung there, heavier than before. Somewhere behind the counter, a coffee pot clicked as it finished brewing. The smell of fresh coffee drifted through the air, absurdly normal against the tension pressing down on the room. Evelyn reached for the edge of the table, not to steady herself this time, but to straighten the napkins that had fallen. She picked one up, folded it carefully, placed it back on the table as if the small act of order mattered, because to her it did. Daniel watched her, his irritation growing. You think acting calm makes you right? He said. You think that little routine changes what you did? No, Evelyn replied softly, but it changes how I carry it. That answer seemed to bother him more than anything she had said before. He stepped closer again, invading her space, towering over her. You people always think dignity is enough, he said, his voice low, edged with something sharper now. It's not. Not in the real world. Evelyn looked up at him. Her eyes were clear. You'd be surprised, she said. At the edge of the room, the man from the corner booth leaned back slightly in his seat. His gaze moved from Evelyn to Daniel, studying, measuring. His hand rested casually near his jacket, but his attention was anything but casual. No one else noticed him. Lily did. Just for a second. She caught the way he watched. Not like a customer. Not like someone curious. But like someone waiting. Like someone who had already decided something and was simply letting it unfold. Her stomach tightened. Back at the table, Daniel shook his head, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, thin and humorless. "You're not in a position to lecture anyone," he said. "You're in a position to fix your mistake." "I offered to," Evelyn replied. "Not with money," he snapped. "With respect." Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "And what does that look like to you?" she asked. Daniel's smile widened. "Simple," he said. "You admit you don't belong here. You apologize properly. And maybe, I decide not to make this worse for you." The implication was clear. A ripple moved through the diner again, softer this time, like a collective breath no one wanted to take. Lily stepped forward without thinking. "Sir, please," she said, her voice shaking but present. "It was an accident. She's a regular here. I said stay out of it," Daniel snapped, turning just enough to silence her again. Lily stopped. Her eyes flicked to Evelyn, searching, apologizing without words. Evelyn gave her the smallest nod. It was almost nothing. But it told Lily everything. "It's all right." Evelyn straightened her shoulders. She wasn't tall. She wasn't imposing. But something about the way she held herself shifted the air around her, subtle but undeniable. "I won't say that," she said. Daniel blinked. "What?" "I won't say I don't belong," Evelyn repeated, her voice still soft, still steady. "Because it wouldn't be true." The room seemed to tighten. Daniel's expression hardened. "You really don't get it, do you?" he said. "People like you don't decide where they belong. The world does." Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. "No," she said quietly. "People like you just think it does." For a second, there was something like surprise in Daniel's eyes. Then it disappeared, replaced by something colder. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said. Evelyn didn't respond. She didn't need to, because the truth was already there, sitting between them, heavy and undeniable. And for the first time since he had walked into that diner, Daniel Reed looked like a man who wasn't entirely in control of the moment anymore. Behind him, unnoticed by most, the man from the corner booth stood up slowly. He didn't rush. He didn't draw attention. He simply stepped toward the door, pausing just long enough to glance back at Evelyn. Their eyes met for the briefest moment. A flicker of recognition passed between them. Then he turned and walked out into the cold. The door swung shut behind him with a soft chime. Inside, the tension remained. And Daniel, unaware of anything that had just shifted beyond his reach, took another step forward. "You're going to regret this," he said. Evelyn looked at him, and for the first time, there was the faintest trace of something new in her expression. Not fear, not anger, but certainty. "We'll see," she said. Across the diner, Lily felt a chill run down her spine. Because something about the way Evelyn said those words didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like a promise. But Daniel Reed didn't hear it that way. To him, it was just another defiance from someone he had already decided didn't matter. He let out a short breath through his nose, half laugh, half irritation, like someone brushing aside a nuisance. Around him, the diner remained frozen in that strange, uncomfortable stillness. The kind that settles in when something wrong has happened, but no one has decided who's brave enough to name it. "You'll see," Daniel repeated, shaking his head. "No, you won't. People like you don't get to see anything. You just deal with what happens." Evelyn didn't respond. She turned back toward her booth, slow and deliberate, as if reclaiming something that had briefly been taken from her. Her hand brushed over the edge of the table, straightening the napkin again, adjusting her cup, restoring order in small, quiet ways. Lily watched her with wide eyes. The redness on Evelyn's cheek hadn't faded, but there was no tremble in her hands, no sign that the moment had broken her in any visible way. If anything, she looked steadier. That unsettled Lily more than anything else, because people didn't usually look like that after something like this. Daniel stood there a moment longer, waiting, expecting something. A raised voice, tears, apology, something that would make sense to him. But none of it came. And slowly, something like irritation gave way to something else, discomfort. He glanced around the room. Phones were still raised. Not all of them, but enough. He noticed it now. The quiet angles of lenses pointed in his direction. The way people weren't quite looking at him, but also weren't looking away. The faint glow of screens reflecting in the diner's old chrome fixtures. His jaw tightened. "Go ahead," he muttered, loud enough to carry. "Record whatever you want. People love playing victim these days." No one answered. The words landed, but they didn't settle the room the way he expected. If anything, they made the silence heavier. At the counter, one of the construction workers finally set his fork down. He didn't speak. He didn't move. But the sound of metal against ceramic rang louder than it should have. Evelyn reached for her tea again. The cup had a hairline crack now, a thin fracture running down one side like a quiet reminder of what had happened. She noticed it, her thumb tracing the edge of it gently, then set it back down without drinking. "Lily," she said softly. The young waitress flinched, then hurried closer. "Yes, ma'am?" Evelyn gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Don't worry about me," she said. "I'm all right." Lily's eyes filled, just slightly. "I should have said something," she whispered. Evelyn shook her head. "You were kind," she said. "That matters." Lily opened her mouth, then closed it again, because she wasn't sure kindness was enough. Across the room, the manager finally stepped forward, wiping his hands nervously on a dish towel. "Sir," he said, addressing Daniel with forced politeness, "maybe it's best if we all just calm things down." Daniel turned toward him sharply. "Calm down," he echoed. "I just had thousands of dollars worth of documents ruined, and you're telling me to calm down?" "We can work something out," the manager said quickly. "We always do." Daniel gave a humorless smile. "I'm sure you do," he said. "That's how places like this survive, right? Making deals, cutting corners." The manager swallowed. Evelyn watched them both, her expression unreadable. And for a moment, the scene shifted, not outwardly, but underneath. As if the weight of the moment wasn't sitting on the slap anymore, but on something deeper, something older, something no one in that room fully understood yet. The sound of a bus passing outside rumbled through the glass. The late afternoon light shifted slightly, casting longer shadows across the diner floor. Evelyn's gaze drifted to the window. For just a second, she wasn't in Roseland Diner anymore. She was somewhere else. A different morning. Years ago. Cold air coming through a broken door. A much smaller space. A younger version of herself standing behind a counter that wasn't polished, wasn't worn, wasn't anything but new and uncertain. She could still remember the smell of fresh paint mixed with cheap coffee. The first diner. Back when she didn't know if anyone would come. Back when every dollar mattered. Back when people had told her she didn't belong there either. Her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the table. Then she let go. Back in the present, Daniel checked his watch, his irritation settling into something more controlled now, more deliberate. "I don't have time for this," he said. "You're going to compensate me or I'll make sure this becomes a much bigger problem for you." Evelyn turned back to him. "I said I would make it right," she replied. "Not like this," he said, "not with polite words and calm voices. That's not how the real world works." Evelyn held his gaze. "I've lived in the real world my entire life," she said quietly. Daniel scoffed. "No," he said, You've survived in it. There's a difference. That landed harder than the slap had. Not louder, not sharper, but deeper. Lily felt it from across the space between them. So did a few others. And still, no one spoke. Because that was the rule of places like this, whether anyone said it out loud or not. Don't get involved. Don't make it worse. Don't draw attention. Evelyn nodded once, almost to herself. Maybe there is, she said. Daniel waited, but she didn't elaborate. She simply reached down slowly, carefully, and picked up her purse from the seat beside her. As she opened it, the contents shifted just enough for Lily to catch a glimpse again. That card. The one with the faded logo. Lily frowned. She knew that logo. Everyone in Chicago knew that logo. But her brain didn't connect it. Not yet. Not in this moment. Evelyn slipped the purse strap over her shoulder. I'm going to step outside for a moment, she said calmly. Get some air. Daniel laughed again. Running away now? He said. Evelyn paused. She turned her head slightly, just enough to look back at him. No, she said. I've never been one to run. Then she walked toward the door. The bell above it chimed softly as she pushed it open. Cold air rushed in again, sharper this time, carrying the distant noise of traffic and the low murmur of the city moving on without them. For a second, the room seemed to breathe. Then the door closed behind her, and everything inside felt different. Daniel exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off tension. Finally, he muttered. But Lily didn't feel relief. Neither did the manager. Neither did anyone who had been paying close enough attention. Because something about the way Evelyn walked out didn't feel like retreat. It felt like a line had just been drawn. And outside on the sidewalk, Evelyn Brooks stood still for a moment, the cold air brushing against her face. She reached up and touched her cheek again, not wincing, just acknowledging. Then she looked down the street and waited. Because she knew something was already in motion, even if no one else did. The cold air outside Roseland Diner pressed against Evelyn Brooks like a quiet hand, steady and familiar. Traffic rolled past in uneven waves, tires hissing against damp pavement, horns sounding somewhere far enough away to feel distant, unimportant. She stood just beyond the doorway, one hand resting lightly against the brick wall. Her breath came slow, controlled. Not because she wasn't affected, but because she had learned a long time ago that control wasn't about stopping pain. It was about deciding what that pain would do next. Across the street, a city bus pulled up with a low groan. A few passengers stepped off, collars pulled high against the chill. One of them, an older man with a worn coat and tired eyes, paused when he saw her. "Miss Evelyn?" he called gently. She turned, her expression softening. "Afternoon, Mr. Jenkins," she replied. He crossed halfway, then hesitated, glancing toward the diner door behind her. Something in her posture, in the faint redness still visible on her cheek, told him more than words could. "You all right?" he asked. Evelyn gave him a small smile. "I've been through worse," she said. He nodded slowly, like he believed her, but didn't like that he had to. "You need anything?" "Just a little time," she said. He lingered a second longer, then tipped his hat slightly and continued down the sidewalk. Evelyn watched him go. People in this neighborhood saw things. They didn't always speak on them, but they saw. She lifted her gaze toward the street again, not searching, not waiting in the usual sense. More like acknowledging, because somewhere out there, a chain had already been pulled. Inside the diner, the atmosphere had shifted, but not in the way Daniel Reed expected. He had taken his seat again, not because he felt finished, but because, in his mind, he had already won. The disruption was over. The problem had walked out. Now, the world would return to its proper order. He pulled his phone from his pocket, tapping through emails with the practiced indifference of someone used to moving on quickly. Numbers, contracts, meetings, real things, important things. Not this, not her. "Coffee," he said without looking up. Lily hesitated, then moved. Her hands were steadier now, but only because something inside her had shifted. Not fear, exactly. Not anymore. Something closer to awareness. She poured the coffee carefully, the dark liquid rising in the cup, steam curling into the air between them. "Here you go," she said quietly. Daniel glanced at her. For the first time, really looked. "You've been here long?" he asked. "About 2 years," she replied. He nodded once. "You should think about where you want to end up," he said. "Places like this, they don't get you very far." Lily didn't answer, not because she didn't have something to say, but because she was starting to understand that men like him didn't listen. They just waited for their turn to speak. Across the room, the manager hovered near the counter, his eyes darting between Daniel and the door, as if expecting something, or someone, to walk back in. "What?" Daniel said suddenly, catching the look. "Nothing, sir," the manager replied quickly. "Just making sure everything's settled." "It is," Daniel said, taking a sip of his coffee. "Handled." But even as he said it, something about the room felt off. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. But the usual rhythm hadn't returned. People were eating again, talking again, but softer, more careful. Like they were all aware of something unfinished hanging in the air. Daniel frowned slightly. He didn't like that. He didn't like things lingering. He checked his watch. Still time before his next meeting. Plenty of time. At the far end of the diner, a television mounted above the counter flickered with muted news coverage. Stock prices, weather updates, a scrolling ticker no one was really watching. Until someone was. The construction worker from earlier leaned back, squinting at the screen. Then at his phone. Then back at the screen again. "Hey," he said quietly to the man beside him. "You see this?" The other man leaned in. "What?" The first man turned his phone slightly. A short video clip. Grainy, shaky, but clear enough. A woman standing. A man raising his hand. The sound wasn't there, but the moment was. The second man's eyes widened. "Is that here?" he whispered. "Yeah," the first man said. The video had already been posted, already been shared, already moving. Daniel didn't notice. Not yet. He took another sip of coffee, then set the cup down with a small, precise motion. His world still felt intact, still controlled, because in his world, things like this didn't spiral. They got contained, handled, buried. Outside, Evelyn shifted her weight slightly, her gaze moving down the street. A black sedan had pulled up at the curb half a block away. It hadn't rushed. It hadn't drawn attention. It had simply arrived. The engine idled quietly. The passenger door opened, and a man stepped out. Not the same one from the diner. Someone else. Younger. Sharper. Dressed simply, but with a presence that didn't need explanation. He looked toward Evelyn. She didn't wave, didn't call out. She just met his eyes. And in that moment, something passed between them that no one inside Roseland Diner could have understood. He gave a small nod, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. Inside the diner, Daniel Reed leaned back in his seat, finally relaxing. This place could use better management, he muttered to no one in particular. People need to learn how to handle situations before they get out of control. The irony hung there, unnoticed, unchallenged, for now. Because what Daniel didn't understand, what he couldn't see, couldn't measure, couldn't control, was that the situation hadn't been handled. It had only just begun, and the kind of power that was about to answer his actions didn't raise its voice. It didn't make threats. It didn't rush. It moved quietly, deliberately. And when it arrived, it didn't ask for permission. It didn't knock on the door or announce itself with sirens or raised voices. It moved in the quiet spaces, in the seconds between breaths, in the glances people thought no one noticed, in the way the air inside Roseland Diner no longer felt the same. Daniel Reed shifted in his seat, not because anything obvious had changed, but because something had. He checked his phone again, scrolling faster this time, his thumb moving with just a little more force than necessary. Emails stacked, notifications buzzed, numbers still lined up the way they were supposed to. Everything looked normal, so why didn't it feel that way? He glanced up. The room wasn't looking at him anymore, not directly, but the awareness was there. He could feel it, like being on a stage he hadn't agreed to stand on. At the counter, the construction workers spoke in low voices now, leaning in closer than before. The young mother kept her child turned away, whispering softly into his hair. The man in the suit still held his phone, but now it wasn't dark. It was recording. Daniel's jaw tightened. Unbelievable, he muttered under his breath. Lily approached again, slower this time. Is there anything else you need? She asked. Her voice was steadier now, not because she wasn't afraid, but because something inside her had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Daniel looked at her, really looked, and for the first time there was no automatic compliance in her posture, no quick apology in her tone, just professionalism, and something else, something quieter. Yeah, he said. I need a manager who knows how to handle customers. I'll get him, she replied. But she didn't rush. She turned, walked back to the counter, and spoke quietly to the manager, who nodded once, his face pale. As he approached Daniel's table, his usual forced confidence seemed thinner, stretched tight. Sir, he said, we can cover any cleaning or document damage. We'll take care of it. Daniel leaned back slightly. That's not the point, he said. The point is accountability, we understand, the manager said carefully. No, Daniel replied. I don't think you do. He gestured vaguely toward the door. You let people like that walk in here and act like this is their space. The words didn't land the way he expected. No one nodded. No one agreed. The silence that followed wasn't supportive. It was distant, like the room had stepped away from him without moving. The manager hesitated, then chose his words carefully. She's been coming here longer than I have, he said. It was a small sentence. Simple. But it carried weight. Daniel stared at him and, he said. And she's never caused a problem, the manager added. Daniel let out a short, sharp laugh until today. No, the manager said quietly. Not even today. That was the first crack. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. Daniel's expression hardened. You're siding with her? He asked. I'm stating facts, the manager replied. Daniel leaned forward. Careful, he said. You don't know who you're talking to. At the counter, Lily felt her chest tighten. She had heard that tone before. Not here, but elsewhere. The tone of someone who believed identity alone should shift outcomes. The tone of someone used to doors opening, phones being answered, problems disappearing. But something in the room didn't respond to it this time. Not the way it usually would. A chair scraped quietly as one of the construction workers stood up. Not aggressively, not confrontationally, just stood. He looked toward the door, then toward Evelyn's empty booth, then back at Daniel. He didn't say anything, but the act itself was enough to ripple through the space. Another man shifted in his seat. The woman with the child looked up briefly, her eyes sharper now. The man in the suit lowered his phone slightly, but didn't stop recording. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of people choosing not to speak, but also no longer choosing to agree. Daniel noticed it, and for the first time, something like uncertainty touched the edges of his control. He masked it quickly. "You think this is over?" he said, his voice rising just slightly. "You think she can just walk out and this goes away?" No one answered, because the truth was, no one believed it would, but not for the reasons Daniel thought. Outside, Evelyn remained where she was. The black sedan idled quietly at the curb, exhaust drifting into the cold air in soft, ghost-like waves. The man who had stepped out earlier now stood a few feet from her. He didn't speak right away. He simply observed. Not her appearance, not her age, but her, as if confirming something. "You all right, Ms. Brooks?" he asked finally. Evelyn gave a small nod. "I've been better," she said. He glanced briefly toward the diner. "We heard," he said. Evelyn's eyes shifted slightly. Not surprised, just acknowledging. "I figured you might," she replied. The man reached into his coat and pulled out a small object. He opened his hand, her ring. Evelyn's gaze softened. "Thank you," she said, taking it carefully. She slipped it back onto her finger, twisting it once, a habit formed over decades. "He didn't know," the man said quietly. "No," Evelyn agreed. "He didn't." The man nodded once. His phone buzzed. He checked it briefly, then looked back up. "It's already moving," he said. Evelyn didn't ask what it was. She already knew. Inside the diner, Daniel Reed stood up again. This time, slower, more deliberate. He reached for his coat, slipping it on with controlled movements. "I'm done here," he said. No one stopped him. No one asked him to stay. But no one rushed to clear his table either. He paused at the register, pulling out his wallet. "How much?" he asked. The manager looked at the untouched coffee, the mess already cleaned, the room still watching. "It's on the house," he said. Daniel smirked slightly. At least someone here understands customer service. But the words rang hollow, even to him. He placed a few bills on the counter anyway, more than necessary. A gesture meant to reassert control, to remind everyone who he was. Then he turned and walked toward the door. The bell chimed as it opened. Cold air rushed in again. And for a brief moment, Daniel Reed and Evelyn Brooks stood in the same frame once more, separated by only a few steps. Daniel glanced at her. Just once, as if deciding whether to say something, then chose not to. He walked past her without a word, toward the street, toward his car, toward a world he believed still worked exactly the way it always had. Behind him, the diner remained, quiet, watching, waiting. And inside that silence, something had already chosen its direction, not loudly, not violently, but completely. Because sometimes the moment that changes everything doesn't look like a beginning. It looks like an ending. And no one in that moment, least of all Daniel Reed, understood which one this was. Daniel stepped off the curb, the cold air biting sharper now as the wind picked up between the buildings. His driver pulled the car door open quickly, head slightly bowed, eyes avoiding the scene entirely. "Office?" Daniel said, sliding into the back seat. "Yes, sir." The door shut with a muted thud, sealing him inside a world that felt controlled again. Or at least, it was supposed to. As the car pulled away, Daniel leaned back, loosening his tie slightly. He checked his reflection in the tinted window, adjusting the line of his collar like nothing had happened. Like this was just another inconvenience in a day full of them. His phone buzzed. He glanced down, expecting another email, another routine update. Instead, he saw a message from one of his junior partners. Did something happen at a diner? Daniel frowned. Another buzz. A second message. There's a video going around. That you? His jaw tightened. He tapped the notification, opening the link. The screen filled with shaky footage. Roseland Diner. His voice faint but unmistakable. His posture. His hand. The moment. Even without sound, the story told itself. Daniel's fingers stilled on the screen. For the first time since he walked out of that diner, something inside him shifted. Not fear, not yet, but awareness. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. He closed the video, then reopened it, watched it again. The angle was worse this time, or maybe clearer. He could see the stillness of the room, the way no one moved, the way Evelyn stood there afterward. That bothered him. More than the recording, more than the angle, more than the fact that it was already spreading. It was the way she stood there, like she wasn't the one who had just lost control. He locked his phone and looked forward. "Turn around," he said suddenly. The driver glanced in the rearview mirror. "Sir?" "Turn the car around." There was a pause. Then the car slowed, signal clicking softly as it moved toward the next intersection. Back at Roseland Diner, the atmosphere hadn't returned to normal. It hadn't even tried. Lily stood behind the counter, her hands resting flat against the surface, her breathing finally steady. The manager leaned beside her, arms crossed, staring toward the door. "You think he's coming back?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," he said. Neither of them looked convinced. At the far end of the diner, the construction workers had finished eating, but hadn't left. They lingered, talking low, watching the door without admitting they were doing it. Something had changed. No one could name it. But everyone felt it. The bell above the door chimed again. Evelyn stepped back inside. The room shifted instantly. Not loudly, but completely. She moved the same way she always did, measured, unhurried, as if time belonged to her, not the other way around. Her coat was buttoned now, her scarf pulled slightly tighter around her neck. Lily rushed forward. "Miss Evelyn, are you sure you're okay?" she asked. Evelyn smiled softly. "I told you," she said. "I am." Her voice carried just enough to settle something in the room. Not the tension, but the fear. Evelyn walked back to her booth. The cracked teacup still sat there. The napkins still folded. The space waiting. She slid back into her seat like nothing had interrupted it. Like the moment had been a pause, not a break. Across the diner, a man cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said, standing halfway, "if you need anything." Evelyn looked up at him and shook her head gently. "Thank you," she said. "But I'm all right." The man nodded, sitting back down. It wasn't that she didn't appreciate the offer. It was that she didn't need it, not in the way people thought. Outside, the black sedan remained parked. The man who had returned her ring leaned against the hood now, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes," he said quietly. "He's still in the area." A pause. "No, she's inside." Another pause. "Understood." He ended the call, his gaze drifting toward the diner windows. Inside, Evelyn lifted her teacup again. This time, she took a sip. The crack didn't matter. Daniel's car turned back onto the block. He saw the diner from a distance. The same building, same faded sign, same place he had already decided was beneath him. And yet, he couldn't leave it alone. "Stop here," he said. The car slowed, pulled up. Daniel stepped out again, this time without waiting for the driver to open the door. The cold air hit harder now, or maybe it just felt that way. He walked back toward the diner, faster this time, more direct. Inside, Lily saw him first. Her stomach dropped. "He's back," she whispered. The manager straightened immediately. The construction workers turned. The room tightened again. The bell chimed. Daniel stepped inside. The warmth hit him, but it didn't settle anything. His eyes went straight to Evelyn, still sitting, still calm, still exactly where he had left her. That irritated him, more than it should have. "You didn't leave," he said. Evelyn looked up. "No," she replied. Daniel took a step closer. "You think this is over?" he asked. Evelyn set her teacup down carefully. "I don't think it ever started the way you think it did," she said. That answer didn't calm him, it pushed him. "You don't get to play games with me," he snapped. Evelyn's gaze remained steady. "I'm not playing," she said. Daniel moved closer. Too close again. The room held its breath. "You're going to fix this," he said, his voice lower now, more controlled, but no less forceful. "Right now, or I will." Evelyn didn't move, didn't lean back, didn't flinch. "You already did what you were going to do," she said quietly. Daniel reached out. Not to strike. Not yet. But to grab. His hand closed around her wrist again. Firm. Too firm. The movement was small, but it broke something in the room. Lily gasped. The manager stepped forward instinctively. "Sir, don't." Daniel didn't let go. "You don't walk away from me," he said. Evelyn looked down at his hand, then back up at his face. "Let go," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Daniel hesitated. Just for a second. Something in her tone, something in the way she said it, didn't match the moment, didn't match her. And for the first time, doubt flickered again, but pride moved faster. "No," he said. Outside, the man by the car straightened. Inside, the tension snapped tighter. And somewhere, far beyond the diner, far beyond Daniel's control, the next move was already being made. In a glass-walled conference room 30 floors above downtown Chicago, the city stretched out like a map of ambition and consequence. Sunlight bounced off steel and glass, reflecting into a room filled with quiet authority. Men and women in tailored suits, voices measured, decisions worth millions unfolding in low tones. At the head of the table sat Marcus Brooks. He wasn't speaking. He didn't need to. The room adjusted itself around him, subtle but undeniable. When he leaned back, others paused. When he glanced down at a document, conversations softened. Power in that room didn't announce itself. It waited. His phone lay face down beside a stack of reports. It rarely interrupted meetings like this. The people who needed to reach him knew better than to do it without reason. So when it vibrated once, sharp and precise against the polished table. Every eye flicked toward it. Marcus didn't move right away. He finished reading the line in front of him, closed the folder, then turned the phone over. A single message. It wasn't long. It didn't need to be. She's been hurt. Nothing else. No explanation. No urgency in the words themselves. But Marcus Brooks didn't need urgency written out for him. The room shifted before he even stood. He pushed his chair back slowly, the faint scrape against the floor cutting through the conversation. "Excuse me," he said. That was all. No one asked why. No one stopped him, because everyone in that room understood something had just taken priority over everything else. Marcus stepped out into the hallway, the door closing softly behind him. The noise of the meeting faded instantly, replaced by the distant hum of the building, elevators moving, phones ringing somewhere far away. He looked at the message again, then pressed a single contact. The line picked up immediately. "Talk." The voice on the other end was the man from outside the diner. "It happened at Roseland," he said. "Late lunch rush. Witnesses, phones out." Marcus didn't interrupt. "He struck her," the man continued. "Twice. Grabbed her wrist. Tried to make her kneel." A pause. Not long. Just enough. Marcus closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. When he opened them again, something had changed. "What's his name?" he asked. "Daniel Reed." Marcus repeated it once under his breath. Not to remember it. To place it. "Where is she now?" "Inside." She stepped out, then went back in. "She's calm." That word lingered. Calm. Marcus exhaled slowly. "That sounds like her," he said. Another pause. Then quieter. "Did she say anything?" The man hesitated. "Yes," he said. "She told him he made a mistake he couldn't undo." Marcus's jaw tightened, not in anger, in recognition. Because he had heard that tone before. Years ago, when he was younger, when the world had tried to tell her she didn't belong. "She always gives people a chance to stop," Marcus said. "And if they don't?" the man asked. Marcus didn't answer right away. He looked out through the glass wall at the city below. Cars moving, people walking, 1,000 small lives unfolding, unaware of what had just shifted. "They don't get another one," he said finally. Back at Roseland Diner, Daniel's grip tightened for just a second longer. Then something in Evelyn's gaze, something steady, unwavering, made him release her wrist. Not because he chose to, but because for the briefest moment, it felt like he had to. He stepped back, regained his posture. "You're lucky I'm in a hurry," he said, smoothing his sleeve. Evelyn didn't respond. She simply adjusted her coat, her movements unhurried, as if the moment had never truly belonged to him. That unsettled him again. More than anything else, the lack of reaction, the lack of fear. It left him with nothing to push against. And for a man like Daniel Reed, that was unfamiliar territory. "I'm done here," he said, louder now, reclaiming the room. No one answered. No one stopped him. But no one agreed either. He turned and walked toward the door again, this time faster, the bell chiming sharply as he pushed it open. Outside, the man by the sedan watched him go, watched the way Daniel moved, the way he carried himself, like the world still worked the same way it always had. The man lifted his phone again. "He's leaving," he said quietly. On the other end of the line, Marcus Brooks had already started walking. Not running, not rushing, but moving with a purpose that didn't need speed. "Stay with her," Marcus said. "I'll handle the rest." He ended the call, turned, and headed back toward the conference room. Inside, the executives looked up as he entered. No one spoke. They didn't need to, because whatever had just happened had changed the air in the room. Marcus picked up his jacket. "We're done for today," he said. One of the partners blinked. "Marcus, the deal, it can wait." There was no argument after that. There never was. As he walked out, assistant already falling into step beside him, Marcus gave one final instruction. "Get me everything on Daniel Reed," he said. "Business, personal, partnerships, liabilities. I want to know what holds him up." "Yes, sir," the assistant replied. "And who he thinks will catch him," Marcus added. The elevator doors opened. Marcus stepped inside. As they closed, his reflection stared back at him in the mirrored walls, calm, controlled. But beneath it, something else. Not anger. Not exactly. Something colder. More precise. The kind of focus that didn't shout, didn't threaten, didn't rush. It simply moved. Back at Roseland Diner, Evelyn sat quietly in her booth. The cracked teacup rested in her hands again. Lily hovered nearby, unsure whether to stay or give her space. "Miss Evelyn," she said softly, "do you want me to call someone?" Evelyn looked up. Her eyes were kind, steady. "No," she said. Then, after a beat, "They already know." Lily frowned slightly. "Who?" she asked. Evelyn gave a small smile, but didn't answer, because some things didn't need to be explained. They just needed time to arrive. And when they did, everything would look different. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Marcus Brooks stepped out into the underground garage, the sound of his shoes echoing across the polished concrete. The air smelled faintly of oil and cold metal, the distant hum of engines idling somewhere deeper in the structure. His assistant followed a step behind, tablet already in hand, fingers moving quickly. "We've started pulling everything we can on Daniel Reed," she said. "Real estate investments, corporate affiliations, board memberships." "Keep going," Marcus said without slowing. "I want patterns, not just facts." "Yes, sir." He reached his car, a sleek black sedan waiting with the engine already running. The driver stepped out immediately, opening the rear door. Marcus paused for just a second, not because he was unsure, but because he was thinking. "Then he got in, Roseland," he said. The door shut. The car pulled out. Above ground, the city moved like it always did, unaware, indifferent, alive with its own rhythm. But inside that car, something far more focused had taken shape. Marcus leaned back, eyes forward, his reflection faintly visible in the tinted glass. "She didn't call me," he said quietly. His assistant glanced up. "No, sir." "She never does," Marcus added. There was no frustration in his voice, only understanding, because Evelyn Brooks had always been that way, even when things were hard, even when things were unfair. She carried it, handled it, made sure no one else had to. But this wasn't something he would let her carry alone, "Sir," the assistant said, her voice more cautious now. "There's already activity online." Marcus didn't look at her. "Show me." She turned the tablet toward him. The video played. Shaky footage, poor angle, but clear enough. He watched the entire thing without blinking. The movement, the moment, the stillness after, and Evelyn, standing, calm, unbroken. When the video ended, Marcus didn't replay it. He didn't need to. "Who posted it?" he asked. "First upload came from a burner account," she replied. "But it's already been picked up. Local feeds, then wider." "Names," Marcus said. "We're tracing." He nodded once. Make sure it keeps moving. The assistant hesitated. Sir? Don't contain it, Marcus said. Let it spread. She studied him for a second, then nodded. Yes, sir. The car turned onto a familiar street. Roseland. The same block. The same diner. From the outside, nothing had changed, but everything inside had. Back at the diner, Evelyn sat quietly, her hands resting around the teacup. The crack in the porcelain had deepened slightly, but it still held. Like her. Lily stood nearby, pretending to wipe down a table that didn't need it. You sure you don't want something else? She asked. I'm sure, Evelyn said gently. Lily nodded, then paused. Miss Evelyn, that man, he's not coming back, right? Evelyn looked at her. Her eyes were kind, but there was something deeper behind them now. People like him don't walk away easily, she said. Lily swallowed. But they do learn, Evelyn added. How? Lily asked. Evelyn didn't answer right away. She simply looked toward the door, as if she could already see what was coming. Outside, the black sedan pulled up. The engine cut. The driver stepped out, opened the door. Marcus Brooks emerged into the cold air. He didn't rush, didn't scan the street, didn't hesitate. He walked straight toward the diner. Inside, the bell above the door chimed. The sound was soft, familiar. But the moment it rang, something in the room shifted. Not tension, not fear. Something else. Recognition. Even if no one could explain it. Marcus stepped inside. His presence didn't demand attention, but it took it anyway. The room adjusted. Subtly. Instinctively. Lily felt it first. She turned. Her eyes widened just slightly. Not because she knew him personally, but because she knew what he represented. That logo, the one she had seen in Evelyn's purse, the one on the diner's old receipts, the one on the uniforms of staff in other locations. It clicked. Not fully, but enough. Marcus's gaze moved across the room, not searching, not scanning, just locating. Then it landed on Evelyn, and everything else faded. He walked toward her, each step steady, measured, uninterrupted. The construction workers at the counter fell silent. The manager straightened. Lily stopped moving completely. Evelyn looked up, and for the first time since the moment began, something in her expression softened. Not because she needed help, but because she recognized who had just walked in. Marcus stopped at the edge of her table. For a second, neither of them spoke. The room held its breath again. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was anticipation. Ma, Marcus said quietly. The word landed differently than anything else that had been said in that room all day. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it changed everything. Lily's hand flew to her mouth. The manager's eyes widened. At the counter, someone whispered, "Wait." Evelyn gave a small smile. "Hello, Marcus," she said. He glanced briefly at her cheek, the faint redness, the mark that hadn't fully faded. Something in his posture shifted, not visibly, but undeniably. Then he looked back at her. "You okay?" he asked. "I am," she said. Marcus nodded once, then turned, slowly, deliberately, and looked around the room, not in anger, not in accusation, but in quiet assessment. Because now, the room wasn't just a place where something had happened. It was a place where something would be answered, and every single person inside it could feel that truth settling in. Heavy, unavoidable, real. Somewhere near the back, a phone camera lifted again, recording, because whatever was about to happen next, people were going to want to remember it. The camera phones didn't lower. If anything, more of them rose. A quiet awareness spread across Roseland Diner, moving from table to table like a ripple no one could stop. People shifted in their seats, straightened their posture, leaned just slightly forward. Something important was happening. And this time, no one wanted to look away. Marcus Brooks stood beside Evelyn's table, his presence calm but immovable, like a line drawn in the middle of the room. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand attention. But the space gave it to him anyway. "Ma," he said again, softer now. "Tell me what happened." Evelyn rested her hands around her cup, her fingers still, her voice measured. "It was an accident," she said. "I bumped his table, spilled his drink." Marcus listened without interrupting. "He didn't see it that way," she added. Marcus's gaze flicked briefly to her cheek again. The mark, faint, but there. Then back to her eyes. "And after that?" he asked. Evelyn met his gaze. "He made a choice." Marcus nodded once. He didn't ask anything else, because he didn't need to. He turned slowly, his eyes moving across the room until they found the manager. "You saw it?" Marcus asked. The manager swallowed hard. "Yes, sir, and?" The manager hesitated, glancing briefly at the other customers, at the phones still recording, at Lily standing frozen nearby. Then he took a breath. He shouldn't have done that," he said. "Any of it." Marcus held his gaze for a moment longer, then nodded. "Thank you," he said. It wasn't approval, it was acknowledgement. Then Marcus turned again, toward the door, as if expecting something, or someone. Outside, the black sedan's engine hummed softly. Daniel Reed's car hadn't made it far, not because of traffic, not because of delay, but because his phone hadn't stopped vibrating. He had ignored the first few messages, dismissed the next. But when a call came through from a senior partner, someone who never called without reason, he answered. "What?" Daniel said, irritation still sharp in his voice. "Tell me that's not you," the voice on the other end said. Daniel frowned. "I don't have time for—" "There's a video," the partner cut in. "It's everywhere." Daniel's grip tightened around the phone. "It's nothing," he said. "A misunderstanding." "Some woman, it doesn't look like a misunderstanding," the partner replied. "It looks like a problem." Daniel leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly. "I'll handle it," he said. "You better," the voice said, "because clients are already asking questions." The call ended. Daniel stared at the screen, then opened the video again. This time, it wasn't just one clip. It was multiple angles, different uploads, different accounts. The same moment, over and over. And now there were comments, reactions, names being mentioned. His name, Daniel Reed, attached to something he couldn't control. "Turn the car around," he said. Again. Back at the diner, the tension held, but it was different now. No longer centered on fear, centered on expectation. Lily stepped closer to Evelyn's table, her voice barely above a whisper. "Miss Evelyn, is he—" she began. Evelyn placed a gentle hand over hers. "It's all right," she said. Lily nodded, though she didn't fully understand why. Because everything about this moment felt like it should be overwhelming. And yet, Evelyn wasn't. That steadiness began to spread, From her to the room. A quiet shift. Subtle, but real. The bell above the door chimed again. Heads turned. Daniel Reed stepped back inside. But this time, he didn't walk in like he owned the room. He walked in like he needed something from it. His eyes moved quickly, scanning, searching. Then they landed on Marcus, and stopped. Because something about Marcus didn't fit into the version of the world Daniel understood. Not the way he stood. Not the way the room reacted to him. Not the way Evelyn looked at him. "Who is that?" Daniel asked, more to himself than anyone else. No one answered. Marcus didn't move. He didn't step forward. He didn't close the distance. He simply stood where he was and waited. Daniel took a step closer, then another, trying to reassert something. Control. Authority, familiar ground. "You're her son?" Daniel said finally. Marcus didn't respond right away. He looked at Daniel. Not with anger, not with intimidation, but with something far more unsettling. "Clarity, yes," Marcus said. The word landed softly, but it echoed. Daniel nodded once, as if that confirmed something. "Then you should understand," he said. "This was an accident. She damaged my property. Things got out of hand." Marcus listened, didn't interrupt, didn't react. Daniel continued, finding his footing again. "I'm willing to move past it," he said. "We don't need to make this bigger than it is." A murmur moved through the room. Not agreement, not approval, just awareness. Marcus's gaze didn't shift. "Bigger than what it is?" he repeated. Daniel held his ground. "Yes." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "Let me make sure I understand," he said. His voice remained calm, measured. But there was something beneath it now, something that hadn't been there before. "You came into a place you don't belong," Marcus continued. "You disrespected the people who work here. You put your hands on my mother." The room went completely still. "And you think that's small?" Marcus asked. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. Because for the first time, the words didn't come easily. "I'm saying we can resolve it," Daniel replied, his tone tightening, quietly. Marcus's expression didn't change. Quietly, he repeated. Then he glanced around the room, at the phones, at the people, at the moment that had already been captured, already been shared, already beyond quiet. "That's not how this works," Marcus said. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then how does it work?" he asked. Marcus looked back at him, and for the first time, there was no softness left in his gaze. "You're about to find out," he said. The words didn't rise. They didn't echo, but they settled into the room like something permanent, unmovable. And suddenly, the balance had shifted. Not dramatically, not violently, but completely. Because Daniel Reed was no longer the one controlling the outcome, and everyone in that diner could feel it. It didn't happen all at once. That was the part Daniel didn't understand. He stood there, still holding on to the version of reality he trusted, one where words, money, and confidence could reshape a moment, where situations bent back into place if you spoke firmly enough, stood tall enough, reminded the room who you were. But this time the room didn't bend. It shifted. Quietly. Irreversibly. Marcus Brooks didn't move closer. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He simply reached into his coat and pulled out his phone. That small action drew more attention than anything else had. Because it wasn't emotional. It was deliberate. Daniel watched him, confusion flickering behind the irritation. "What are you doing?" he asked. Marcus didn't answer. He dialed a number, held the phone to his ear, and waited. The silence stretched. Then, "It's Marcus," he said calmly. A pause. "I need you to take a look at something." He turned the screen slightly, not enough for Daniel to see, but enough for the tone to carry. "Yes," Marcus continued. "It's already out there." Another pause. "No," he said. "Don't contain it." That word again. "Don't contain it." Daniel's chest tightened slightly. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" he demanded. Marcus ended the call, slipped the phone back into his coat, then looked at Daniel. "I'm making sure what already happened doesn't disappear," he said. Daniel let out a short laugh, but it didn't land the way it had before. "Disappear?" he echoed. "You think a shaky video from a cheap diner changes anything?" No one in the room agreed. No one needed to, because the phones were still up, still recording, still capturing. And somewhere beyond those walls, people were already watching. Daniel's own phone buzzed again. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again, and again. The sound started to cut through the silence like something persistent, something that refused to be ignored. He pulled it out, irritation sharp now. "What?" he snapped into the screen. Another call. Another message. He opened one without thinking. Then another. Then a third. His expression shifted. Just slightly. But enough. The construction worker at the counter noticed first. "Yeah," he murmured under his breath, eyes on his own phone. "It's blowing up." Lily glanced over. "What is?" she whispered. He turned the screen just enough for her to see. The video. Not one version. Dozens. Different angles. Different captions. The same moment. Shared. Commented. Spreading. Lily's breath caught. Back at the table, Daniel's jaw tightened. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. His thumb moved quickly, opening messages, closing them, scanning faster now. His partner again. Clients. A number he didn't recognize. Another message from the firm. "We need to talk. Urgently." His chest rose and fell once. Controlled. Measured. But the rhythm had changed. He looked up at Marcus. "This doesn't mean anything," he said. Marcus didn't respond. Because it already did. Outside, a second car pulled up behind the black sedan. Then a third. Not flashy, not loud, but intentional. Inside, the manager noticed. His eyes flicked toward the window, then back to Marcus, then to Evelyn, and something clicked. Something he hadn't fully understood before. "Miss Evelyn," he said quietly. She looked at him. He hesitated, then spoke more carefully. You've been with us a long time," he said. Evelyn gave a small smile. "Yes," she replied. He nodded slowly, then looked at Marcus. Recognition settling in. Not just of who he was, but what that meant. Daniel noticed the shift. He saw the way the manager stood straighter, the way Lily's fear had changed into something else, the way the room no longer reacted to him the same way. And for the first time, he felt it. Not fully, but enough. The edge of something slipping. "This isn't over," Daniel said, his voice lower now. Marcus met his gaze. "You're right," he said. Daniel took a step forward, trying to reclaim something. Anything. "You think a few calls change who I am?" he said. Change what I've built? Marcus didn't move. No, he said. Daniel's expression hardened. Then what? Marcus tilted his head slightly. They reveal it, he said. That landed. Not loudly, but precisely. Daniel's phone buzzed again. This time he answered. What? He snapped. Silence on the other end for a second. Then, we're pulling you off the deal, a voice said. Daniel froze. What? The board doesn't want the exposure, the voice continued. Not right now. That's not your decision, Daniel said, his tone tightening. It is now. The call ended. Daniel stared at the phone, then slowly lowered it. The room watched, not with satisfaction, not yet, but with something close. Because this was the moment where the first crack became visible, and once it showed, it couldn't be hidden again. Marcus didn't smile, didn't react. He simply stood there, watching, because he understood something Daniel still didn't. Collapse didn't need force. It needed momentum. And that had already begun. Across the diner, Lily whispered under her breath, "It's really happening." The construction worker nodded. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It is." Daniel looked around the room again. But this time, he didn't see silence. He saw distance, the kind that couldn't be crossed by words, or money, or force. And for the first time since he walked into that diner, Daniel Reed didn't look like the man in control. He looked like a man realizing he never had been. Not here, not in this moment, and definitely not anymore. The realization didn't arrive with noise. It didn't crash into Daniel Reed's world like something dramatic or sudden. It settled, quietly, like dust in a room that had been disturbed too many times. He stood there, phone still in his hand, the screen dimming slowly as another call came through, then another, then another. Names he recognized, numbers he didn't. Each vibration chipped away at something he had always taken for granted. Certainty. Control. He didn't answer this time. He couldn't. Because for the first time in years, Daniel Reed didn't know what to say. Across from him, Marcus Brooks didn't press forward, didn't escalate, didn't need to, because the room had already turned, not just against Daniel, but toward something else, toward Evelyn. Lily noticed it first. The way people began to look at her, not with pity, not with distance, but with something closer to respect, recognition. The construction worker at the counter stood up again, this time without hesitation. He walked over slowly, stopping a few feet from Evelyn's table. "Ma'am," he said, his voice steady. "You handled that better than most people could." Evelyn looked up at him. A soft smile touched her face. "Thank you," she said. He nodded, then stepped back, not lingering, not making it about himself, just acknowledging. That was all it took. A second person moved closer, then another, not crowding, not overwhelming, just present. The silence that had once protected Daniel now belonged to Evelyn, and it spoke louder. Daniel saw it, felt it, and for the first time he didn't know how to interrupt it. "This is ridiculous," he said, though the words lacked force now. "You're all acting like this is something it's not." No one answered, because now they didn't need to. Marcus finally stepped forward. Not aggressively, not confrontationally. Just enough. "You're right," Marcus said calmly. Daniel blinked. "What?" "This is not what you think it is," Marcus continued. Daniel let out a short breath. Finally, he muttered. Some sense, but Marcus's expression didn't change. You thought this was about a mistake, he said. Daniel's jaw tightened. It was, he replied. Marcus shook his head slightly. No, he said. It wasn't. The room leaned in again. Not physically, but emotionally. Because something important was about to be said. Marcus gestured lightly toward Evelyn. This woman, he said, has spent more years building something than you've spent tearing things down. Daniel frowned. What does that even mean? It wasn't Marcus who answered. It was the manager. His voice hesitant at first, then stronger. She helped keep this place open, he said. Daniel turned. What? The manager swallowed. Years ago, he continued, when we almost lost the diner, someone stepped in, covered legal fees, connected us with the right people, kept us from shutting down. Daniel looked back at Evelyn. She didn't react, didn't confirm, didn't deny. She simply sat there. The same woman he had dismissed an hour ago. That was her? Daniel asked. The manager nodded slowly. And not just here, he added. Other places too. Lily stepped forward, her voice quiet but clear. My cousin works at a diner up north, she said. Same thing happened. Same help. They always said it came from someone who didn't want credit. Daniel's gaze shifted between them, trying to piece it together, trying to understand. But it didn't fit. Because in his world, people like Evelyn didn't operate that way. They didn't have that kind of reach, that kind of influence, that kind of quiet power. Marcus watched the realization struggle to form, then spoke again. You walked into a place built on work you didn't see, he said, on people you didn't bother to understand. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it. Because for once, there was nothing immediate to say. Evelyn finally spoke, her voice gentle, steady. People don't always show you everything they've been through, she said. The room listened. They don't always show you what they've built, she continued, or who they've helped, or what they carry. Daniel looked at her. Really looked this time. Not at her coat, not at her age, but at her. And something shifted. Too late. But you still choose how you treat them, Evelyn said. The words didn't accuse, they didn't punish, they simply existed, and that made them heavier. Daniel's shoulders dropped slightly. Just a fraction. But enough. I didn't know, he said. It wasn't an apology. Not yet. But it was the closest he had come. Evelyn nodded. I know, she replied. And somehow, that made it worse. Because she wasn't surprised. Marcus stepped back slightly, giving the moment space. Because this wasn't about confrontation anymore. It was about clarity. Daniel looked around the room. At the people, at the phones, at the distance that had formed between him and everything he thought he controlled, then back at Evelyn. What happens now? He asked. Evelyn held his gaze. Her answer came without hesitation. You live with the choice you made, she said. No anger, no satisfaction, just truth. And in that moment, Daniel Reed understood something he had avoided his entire life, that some consequences didn't arrive as punishment. They arrived as reality, and there was no way to talk your way out of them. The room remained quiet, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one had meaning, and for the first time since he walked into Roseland Diner, Daniel Reed wasn't the center of it. Evelyn Brooks was. The woman he had misjudged. The woman he had dismissed. The woman who never needed to prove anything, because everything she was had already been built. In silence, in patience, in dignity. That was how Evelyn Brooks had built her life. Not loudly, not in ways that demanded recognition, but in small, consistent choices that added up over years most people never bothered to notice. And now, all of it stood in that room, visible, unmistakable, unquestionable. Daniel Reed felt it before he fully understood it. The weight of something he couldn't argue with, couldn't dismiss, couldn't reduce to numbers or contracts or influence, because this wasn't about leverage. It was about truth. And truth didn't negotiate. The room remained still, but no longer uncertain. The lines had been drawn, the sides had been chosen, and Daniel wasn't on the side he thought he was. He looked at Evelyn again. Really looked this time, at the way she sat, calm, composed, unshaken, at the way people moved around her now, not cautiously, but respectfully, at the way Marcus stood nearby, not protecting her like someone fragile, but honoring her like someone strong. Daniel started, then stopped, because for the first time in a long time, words didn't come easily. Not the kind he was used to. Not the kind that fixed things. I didn't think. He tried again. Evelyn shook her head gently. That's the problem, she said. The words weren't harsh, but they landed heavier than anything else had. Daniel swallowed. His phone buzzed again. This time he didn't ignore it. He looked down. Another message. Then another. Then one that made his grip tighten. We're suspending your access pending review. His chest rose slowly, then fell. The room watched, not eagerly, not cruelly, just witnessing. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about consequence. Daniel looked back up at Marcus, at Evelyn. At least let me fix this, he said, quieter now. Marcus didn't respond. He looked at Evelyn. Because this wasn't his decision. Evelyn held Daniel's gaze. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, no, she said. Daniel blinked. No? He repeated. You don't fix this by trying to undo it, Evelyn said gently. You fix it by understanding why it happened in the first place. Daniel's shoulders dropped slightly. The fight in him, whatever was left of it, began to fade, because there was nothing left to push against. No argument, no leverage, no angle. Just himself. And what he had done. Marcus stepped forward slightly. Not threatening, not aggressive, just present. The rest, he said calmly, will take care of itself. Daniel nodded slowly, not because he agreed, but because, deep down, he knew it was true. He looked around the diner one last time, at the faces, at the silence that had changed, at the moment that had slipped completely out of his control. Then he turned and walked out. This time, no one watched him leave. Not because they didn't care, but because the story no longer belonged to him. It belonged to her. The door closed behind him with a soft chime, and just like that, the tension lifted. Not all at once, but enough. Lily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The construction workers returned slowly to their seats. The young mother loosened her grip on her child. The room began to move again, but differently, lighter. Evelyn picked up her teacup. The crack was still there, but it held. She took a small sip, then set it down. Lily approached her, hesitant but sincere. I'm sorry, she said. I should have done more. Evelyn smiled. You did enough, she replied. Lily shook her head. I stayed quiet. Evelyn reached out, placing her hand gently over Lily's. So did a lot of people, she said. What matters is what you do next time. Lily nodded, her eyes softening. I won't stay quiet again, she said. Evelyn squeezed her hand lightly. I believe you. Marcus stepped closer. You ready to go, Ma? He asked. Evelyn looked around the diner, at the place she had helped keep alive, at the people who had found their voices, if only a little. Then back at her son. In a minute, she said. Marcus nodded. He understood. Evelyn reached into her purse and placed a few bills on the table, more than enough for the tea. Lily noticed. Miss Evelyn, you don't have to. I know, Evelyn said. Then she smiled. But I always do. She stood slowly, not because she was weak, but because she moved with intention. Marcus stepped beside her, not guiding, not rushing, just there. They walked toward the door together. The bell chimed softly as they stepped outside. The late afternoon sun had shifted, casting a warmer glow across the street. The cold air still lingered, but it felt different now, lighter, cleaner. Evelyn paused on the sidewalk. A small boy stood nearby holding his mother's hand, watching her with quiet curiosity. She smiled at him. He smiled back. Simple, uncomplicated, honest. Marcus watched the exchange, then looked at his mother. You know, he said, you could have handled that a lot differently. Evelyn glanced at him. I know, she said. Why didn't you? He asked. She looked back toward the diner, then out at the street, at the people, at the world that kept moving, whether anyone was watching or not. Because, she said softly, the world doesn't need more people proving they're strong. She met his eyes. It needs more people remembering they're human. Marcus nodded slowly, and for a moment, the city seemed quieter, not because the noise had stopped, but because something deeper had settled. Evelyn Brooks adjusted her coat, took a step forward, and walked on, leaving behind a room that would remember her, a moment that would travel farther than she ever intended, and a truth that didn't need to be shouted, because it had already been seen. That a person's worth is never defined by how they look, or where they sit, or what others assume, but by what they build, what they give, and how they stand, even when the world expects them to fall. And inside Roseland Diner, life returned, but not the same, never the same. Because some moments don't just pass, they stay, they change people, quietly, permanently.
And long after the noise faded, they remind us who we choose to be. If we pay attention, if we're brave enough, or if we're willing to stay, even when no one else does. When Evelyn Brooks picked up and chose dignity instead of anger, she didn't just end a moment, she revealed everything that truly mattered. Sometimes, the people who change the world aren't the loudest in the room. They are the ones who quietly build, give, and stand firm when it counts. And the real cost of judgment isn't just what you say, it's what it exposes about who you are. So the next time you see someone like Evelyn, someone overlooked, underestimated, pause for a second. You don't need to know their whole story. You just need to treat them like a matters. If this story stay with you, comment one below and tell me if you were in that dinner, would you have spoken up or stayed silent? There's another story coming. That might make you think twice about the next choice you make.